Okay, so hope you had some time to try 6, 7, and 8 while the second video was getting ready. 9 is not odd, so it is not a perfect square. So we're going to break this down to the biggest even number under 9, which is 8, times x. I'm not going to put those ones anymore. The square root of x to the 8th is x to the 4th. And we got to carry down the square root of x for the right. X to the 3rd, not a perfect square. We break it down to 2 square roots. X to the 2nd and x. X to the 2nd is a perfect square because it's an even power, so that is x, the square root of x. Last one. Remember again, don't get confused. This is a power and it's odd. Powers that are odd are not perfect squares. When you break it down, it's the biggest even number underneath there, which is 24 and a 1. The square root of m to the 24th, you're just dividing it by 2. So that's m to the 12th, square root of m. Okay? Next row. Things are going to change again. So each time we're adding a new element. If you look at the next row, there is now a number on the outside. On number 9, there is a 2 out here. Now that 2 means we're going to multiply by 2. When we look at the square root of 12, that is not a perfect square. The square root of 12 is not a perfect square, so we have to find the biggest factor that is in 12 as a perfect square. So we're going to write 2 square roots. The biggest perfect square that goes into 12 is 4. 4 times 3. I'm going to grab my highlighter here. We change the factor to the square root of 4 because we know what the square root of 4 is. I'm going to come down again. This 2 comes down. This is times whatever the square root of 4 is. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 3 comes down for the right. We have to do one more thing in this problem. We have to multiply our whole numbers. So this becomes 4 the square root of 3. Take a look at that again. You got to break down your perfect squares. And then when we go to number 10, I see the 5. I'm going to bring it down. Underneath that square root, there's an 8 and there is an x to the 4th. So you take each one individually. The square root of 8 is not a perfect square, but there is a factor of 8 that is a perfect square. The factor of 8 that is a perfect square is 4. 4 times 2. Now remember, I'm picking 4 because that's a perfect square. So that takes care of the 8. And then I look at the variable. And x to the 4th is a perfect square. It is a perfect square because it's an even power, so I'm going to leave it as x to the 4th. I'm not changing that. I'm not breaking it down because it's a perfect square. I'm going to grab my highlighter. I'm going to highlight the square root of 4 and the square root of x to the 4th. The reason I'm highlighting those is because those are perfect squares, and I can find the square root of both of those. Next line of work, I'm bringing down my 5. I'm going to multiply it by. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of x to the 4th is x to the 2nd. There's one more thing I have to write here that I didn't deal with. It's the square root of 2. Take a look at that and why I changed the ones I did. One last step. I have to multiply 5 times 2. That is 10. X squared, square root of 2, and there's the answer to number 10. So I would like you to try 11 using 9 and 10 as a guide. I'm going to stop talking for a minute and a half or so. You try number 11. Okay, so I'm going to start number 11. Even if you're not done, I apologize if I'm going too fast. 10 is going to come down. I have to think of the perfect square factors of the 18. So I'm going to write 2 square root signs. The biggest perfect square factor in 18 is 9, and that's 9 times 2. Then I'm going to ask myself m to the third. That is to an odd power, so m to the third is not a perfect square. So I have to break that down once again to 2 square roots. Remember, when it's an odd power, you pick the biggest even number under that, which is 2. Sorry, that's kind of messy. And then this is just m. So take a look at that first. Make sure you understand why I broke it down like I did. I'm going to grab my highlighter, and I'm going to highlight 9 and m squared. Now remember, the reason I'm highlighting those is because those are perfect squares, and I can find the square root. So the next line of work, I'm going to have my 10. I'm going to multiply it by the square root of 9 is 3 times the square root of m squared, m. Now here's where you have to watch. There are 2 things that need to go under the square root. So once there's more than one thing under the square root, I'm going to put them together. So there's a 2 under there and an m under there. They go together. They're multiplied together under there. And one last step, 10 times 3 is 30. M, the square root of 2m. It's a step-by-step process. You want to pay attention to what you're doing. Number 12. I see the negative 3. And then I say the square root of 25. Well, I'm lucky, because if I realize that 25 is a perfect square. So I'm not going to rewrite anything with that. I'm going to say, okay, that's a perfect square. I don't want to rewrite it because it turns into a 5. So if you have any square roots that are perfect squares, you just simplify. And this answer would be negative 15. Now I'm not going to do all the rest of them. We're going to skip around. And then you'll have some time to start your homework. Let's do number 13 and 15. Okay. Number 13, there's no number on the outside, so we don't have to worry about that. There's a 75, an x to the 7th, and a y to the 5th. So 75 is not a perfect square. But we have to think of the biggest perfect square factor that would go into 75. These are where you're doing these mentally in your head. Hopefully you realize that 25 goes into 75 3 times. I picked 25 because it's a perfect square. Then I go to x to the 7th. Well, that's an odd power. So I have to break that down into 2 of these. Remember, when it's odd, you pick the biggest even number underneath it, which would be 6. And I just have an x here. I go on to y to the 5th. That's odd, so I have to break it down again. That'll be y to the 4th and y. Okay, I'm going to grab my highlighter. I'm going to highlight the ones that have to change because they are perfect squares. 25 is a perfect square. X to the 6th is a perfect square. Y to the 4th is a perfect square. Those 3 I'm going to simplify. That will turn into 5. X to the 6th will turn into x to the 3rd. Y to the 4th will turn into y to the 2nd. So I simplified all those perfect squares. And now I have to combine everything that's left under the square root. So that will be 3x, y. Okay? One more of these kind, then we'll do some fractions. Number 15. I see the 3 on the outside. 32. 32 is not a perfect square. So I need the biggest perfect square factor in 32. The more that you do these, the faster these factors will come to you. The biggest perfect square factor in 32 is 16. Try to memorize these because they're going to happen a lot. 16 times 2. Then I notice a to the 8th. Well, that is a perfect square, so I'm going to leave it a to the 8th. It's a perfect square because it is an even power. But b to the 5th, that's odd. So I need 2 square roots. That will be b to the 4th and b. Take a look at that. Process it. Hopefully you understand it. Grabbing my highlighter. I'm going to change 16, a to the 8th, and b to the 4th. I'm changing those because those are perfect squares. So I'm going to bring down the 3. Multiply. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of a to the 8th is a to the 4th. Square root of b to the 4th is b to the 2nd. I changed my yellow ones. I have a square root left. Underneath the square root, I have 2b. And the final thing I do is multiply what's left. That is 12, a to the 4th, b to the 2nd, the square root of 2b. I hope this is making sense to you. On Monday, we're going to add radicals. So you have to know how to simplify them. So let's see down here, which ones do I want to do? Let's see. Let's do number 17 and 19. When you have square roots, the first thing you want to do is see if you have any perfect squares. When I look at 17, I notice that this one, 81, is a perfect square. So I'm going to change that to 9 because the square root of 81 is 9. But now I have to break down the square root of 24 because that's not a perfect square. So I have to think of the biggest perfect square factor that goes into 24, and we've already done that one today. That is 4. That's the square root of 4 times the square root of 6. And I like the square root of 4 because I can simplify that to a 2. So this is 2 to the square root of 6. I'm going to take that and put it in the numerator because the square root of 24 turns into 2 to the square root of 6. The numbers on the outside here, 2 and 9, they cannot be simplified because 2 doesn't go into 9. And some people want to try to simplify the square root of 6 and 9, but if it's underneath the square root, you cannot simplify it with one not under the square root. Okay? Cannot. So on this last one, number 19, I noticed that the square root of 64, that's an 8. I'm going to change that. I'm going to break down the square root of 28. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go fast. That's the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. The square root of 4 turns into a 2. So when I put 2 to the square root of 7 up here, I can simplify this one because 2 and 8, they can simplify. And if you can simplify those, you must. So this answer is the square root of 7 over 4. And the reason it's that is 2 over 8 simplifies to 1/4. I would make sure you keep your notes out when you're doing your homework. And that's what you have left for the rest of the period. Hopefully you understand it. These videos will be posted if you need to go back over it. Good luck.